In today's video, I'll be giving you 6 different examples of how you can instantly improve your writing. So here we have example 1 with too many adverbs and telling. John slowly walked cautiously down the dark hallway. He was very scared because he knew something bad was probably going to happen. His heart beat loudly in his chest as he nervously looked around carefully. The hallway was creepy and scary and made him feel frightened. Suddenly he quickly turned around because he heard a loud noise behind him. This example has way too many adverbs and too much telling. We are describing everything John is doing rather than actively showing the audience how the character is feeling. So as I begin correcting this example paragraph, what I'm really looking at is what we're trying to convey through the scene. So I wanted to focus more on showing the dark hallway and talking about why the dark hallway seems ominous. The hallway itself does not seem ominous until we show that he's actively being chased by an enemy. So I started it saying, the dark hallway loomed in front of him, silently judging his escape. John's heart pounded in his ears, blocking out the noise of the approaching enemy. Now, as I started to write the next part, I started writing it with another sound. When you're writing scenes, balance the amount of senses. Don't have one hearing sense and then another hearing sense. Try to break up the senses you use in the scene in order to make the scene feel more immersive. For example, I started the scene mentioning the heart thudding, and I was going to continue it with floorboard creaking, but these are two sounds, so it would make more sense to continue with the sense of feeling, and I instead focused on the pain in the character's twisted ankle, which breaks up the senses in the scene. That is how I sort of broke down the scene, rather than simply telling what the character's experiencing. When I first wrote it, it felt like there was too much telling, and you really want to put yourself in the scene and really try to imagine what the character is experiencing. So I ended up writing, every step sent a jolt of pain through his twisted ankle, yet he urged himself onward. As the character gets to the back door, I wanted to add a twist. Instead of a loud noise, I wanted to make it that there's something unexpected, like the killer has the key. And then this is where I brought in the enemy, where it says looking for this. Heart in his throat, John turned. The killer smiled at him, holding the key in one bloodied hand. I feel like this conveys the scene much better, and instead of telling the audience what's happening, we're putting them in the scene, really showing it from John's perspective. So the next example we're looking at is what's called purple prose. Purple prose is a flowery writing style. If you write in this style, it can be very hard to digest what's actually being read, and as a reader it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So the example is, the moon, a luminescent celestial pearl, suspended within the immeasurable velvet tapestry of infinity, bestowed its ardent radiance upon the infinitely sorrowful forest, where every trembling leaf appeared to whisper ancient elegies into the melancholic embrace of eternity, while the wind danced with almost supernatural wistfulness through the labyrinthine branches. As you can see, that is very hard to read and understand. The first thing we want to do when fixing this is we want to really break it down to the basics. So really ask yourself, what is this scene actually trying to say? First of all, we are talking about the full moon hanging low in the darkened sky as the enchanted forest came to life. So it is night and there is an enchanted forest. That is clear enough to understand. As the wind whispered through the trees, nocturnal animals stirred from their slumber. So we're sort of bringing the audience closer into the scene. We're revealing more about the forest. We're revealing that there are nocturnal animals waking up. So it is nighttime. I wanted it to seem like this magical forest world is waking up. So while the day slept, the night awakened. I feel like this new version really presents the forest a lot better. It's much clearer that it's night and there's a forest and that it seems magical. So it's much easier to understand rather than using a lot of descriptive words that aren't necessary for the scene. So the next example we're looking at is clunky dialogue, and this is something I tend to see a lot, and it's very easy to fix. We really just want to know what we're trying to get across and what information is important for the readers to know. So in this example, the dialogue is, "Hello Sarah," Mark said. "Hello Mark, it is good to see you again after the 3 years since we graduated from college," Sarah replied. "Yes, as you know, I now work at the law firm that I told you about during our graduation ceremony. I remember that information because we have been friends since childhood. The problem with this example is that no one actually talks like this. It's clear that this information is necessary and the writer is trying to get across this information, but it's very hard to feel immersed because it isn't natural. So let's clean it up and make this dialogue feel a lot more natural. We really need to think about, when we begin fixing dialogue, why are the characters having this conversation right now? What is the goal and purpose for the characters to actually be talking in the scene? And yes, you want to deliver that information, but you also want to make sure that it makes sense for them to be saying that information in the scene. Remember showing versus telling, and there's many times where it can be clear enough when you show it through subtle hints in the scene rather than directly telling it through words. So I began writing my own example, and I actually forgot about the bit where it was mentioning the law firm, so I ended up changing that again and rewriting it so that Sarah is a lawyer in this scene. So what I decided is that to really indicate this, maybe Mark could be Sarah's new client, and that would be a really interesting way for the characters to suddenly meet after they had graduated. It's been a long time since they've seen each other, so that could be an interesting scene. So I started writing, Mark could recognize that fiery red hair anywhere. As she turned around, papers in hand, a spark of recognition lit up her eyes. Mark, she greeted. Now, I started writing this in that context that Mark is actually Sarah's client. When I first wrote the scene, I wrote it with Sarah acting professional, but since they're friends, it would actually make more sense for Sarah to drop the professionalism. And this is why it's really important to know ahead of time what you are wanting to convey, so you can go back and ensure that it makes sense in all of your descriptions and the dialogue. So that is why I went back and I added, Mark, Sarah greeted, dropping the professional act and giving him a brilliant smile, which is something that she would do when seeing an old friend. When I read the name of my client, well, I never imagined. I know, Mark agreed, shaking his head. A lot has happened. In example 4, we're looking at a weak action scene. Fighting scenes should feel like the audience is actively participating, and the example doesn't feel very strong. Emily picked up the sword, then she swung it. The monster tried to attack. Emily moved out of the way. Then she swung the sword again. The monster got hurt, then it fell down. Emily was happy because she won the fight. It feels like the audience is reading a description, not actively seeing what Emily is doing or feeling. There are no visual details, making it very hard to imagine, and it's hard to understand what Emily's main reactions are because there is description, but there's not enough actual visual context to be able to imagine it. So the ogre was approaching quickly, heavy footsteps shaking the earth beneath her. One chance, that was all she had. So here in this part we have short sentences which speed up the pacing. Emily picked up the iron blade, hand trembling. As the ogre rounded the corner, she drove the sword down. The beast roared and she did it again, moving with the fear of a mortal and the purpose of a monster. Until the ogre lay still and Emily's hands were covered in its blood. That's an example of how to bring your audience into the scene. The descriptive text doesn't really tell you anything, but visual examples do. It is clear in the new version that Emily is scared and she fights anyway. This is much better conveyed. In the first version, we don't really know what Emily is feeling. We know she is happy, but that doesn't show how she felt in the moment. Try to get into your character's mind and really convey what they're feeling during the battle scene. So now we're looking at example 5, which is a point of view drift, and this is actually something I see probably most commonly. It's when you are not being entirely clear on which point of view you're seeing the scene from, and instead you're drifting from one character's mind to another. So the initial example is, David watched Anna stare out the window, wondering whether she regretted leaving home. She secretly wished she had never accepted the job. Now here we're switching to Anna's perspective when we really shouldn't be. David thought she looked confident, although he couldn't possibly know she was terrified that her boss would discover the truth she'd been hiding for months. So you can see we're going back and forth between Anna and David's thoughts, and it feels confusing because we don't know whose perspective we're really focusing on. Just choose one character to really simplify the perspective. I decided for this example to choose David because he's the one that we start the scene with. So initially when I began writing the scene, I was trying to really show Anna's reaction, but keep in mind too that it says that David thinks that she looks confident. So in the scene, Anna should appear confident to David, even though Anna does not feel confident. So we need to sort of convey those emotions. So initially I started with David entered the living room, but it actually ended up being better cutting that out and saying simply Anna gazed out the window with a distant expression on her face. We don't need to know that David has entered the room. We can simply focus on Anna. So instead of conveying Anna's thoughts through the minds, I'm instead going to show how we can convey Anna's perspective through her dialogue and body language. So we're still seeing it from David's perspective, but we are getting hints towards Anna's true thoughts and feelings. So we have Anna, David said for the third time, and she flinched, finally looking up at him. Having David say it for the third time means that Anna did not hear it for the other 2 times. Now initially I had Anna say, sorry, I didn't notice you, but if Anna is appearing confident to David, that is not something that a confident person would necessarily say. So I ended up changing those lines, and I said, I didn't realize you were home. Anna gave him a confident smile, yet it didn't reach her eyes. So she is smiling at David and looking confident, and David says, what's going on? David continued, furrowing his brow in concern. Is it about work? No, Anna said quickly. No, my job is great. Really, I couldn't be happier. Now see that the emotions are still conveyed, but on the surface, Anna still seems confident to David. We're still seeing this from David's perspective without hopping between David and Anna's thoughts, and this feels much more natural. So we're now looking at the final example, example 6, which is repetition, and it can really make the scene feel too repetitive. So the cafe was small. The small tables were close together in the small room. A small bell rang as a small woman walked through the small door. Everything about the place felt small, and Jack thought it was a very small cafe. Obviously, the word small is used way too much. We can transform the scene without the word small. So we really need to think about what are we actually trying to convey with this word choice, because small on its own is not a very descriptive word. The cafe itself doesn't need to be small, but it should feel small. And how can the cafe feel small? When I think of a cafe being small, it makes me think that it's cluttered. The interior of the cafe was cluttered, creating a stifling atmosphere. So it makes you feel like there is so much in the cafe, so much furniture, that it feels stifling. It feels small inside the cafe. Each table groaned with an array of ornaments, forcing the diners to balance their plates precariously at the edges. So you can see that there is so much on the tables that the diners have to put their plates at the edge. That makes the cafe seem very small. When Chris finally found the counter amid the chaos, he rang a tiny bell. A hunched elderly woman emerged from the back room, beaming at him, using a stool to reach the register. So we don't even use the word small in any of those examples. We are showing the audience why the cafe feels small and feels cluttered rather than overusing a word. So thank you so much for watching my video today, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know the parts that you struggle with the most when it comes to writing, because I would love to hear your thoughts, and I'm sure others would love to hear your thoughts too. Visit my website minazcross.com for resources, templates and workbooks that can help you to level up your story. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!